Welcome to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and joining me today is internationally well-known author, Mr. Mark Spagnuolo, who's also husband to the well-known Glowforge influencer, Nicole.
Right. Love that laser, man. She's very good at it. But yeah, thank you for the intro. Appreciate being here.
Yeah. So, once again, I mentioned it on the pre-show that I appreciate your time and the time you take to come on the show and share your great knowledge.
Of course,
especially your dad jokes.
Yeah. That's one of my best things that I know how to do. Well, and that's the funny thing that I like about being on your show is that it is things that I don't have specific knowledge on. It's sharing my opinions and how I deal with things. But I wouldn't call it knowledge. It's not like I am not as confident as I am with the things I say about woodworking when it comes to parenting, mental health, all the things that I do to deal with my own neuroses are just things that I'm kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall like everybody else and trying to figure it out. So it's a refreshing take to talk about these things.
Well, here's the dirty secret about mental health and about higher education. Nobody actually knows everything either. Everybody's basically just throwing their spaghetti against the wall and trying to make it stick. It's like you go, everybody's heard of Sigmund Freud, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go down from there, and you just go into this huge realm of well, this is my theory, this is my theory, this is my theory, and they're all saying kind of the same thing.
Sure.
But in different ways. And then you read the research on it. Well, which one is actually true? And they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're all, it's what everybody's doing is like, well, this is my theory, but it only works for this group of people. So then you have to go to a different theory for this group of people. And
yeah, basically
that's what they're all doing is just kind of making stuff up.
Humans are complex beasts, I mean, you could think you have it down, and then you put another subject, another person under those same circumstances, and you get a completely different reaction. I think we're just too highly variable and too complex creations to be able to narrow down that easily.
Well, and that's it, right? Like you go, like one of the main categories of like psychology, I guess in general, would be like behaviorism versus I'm tired. My kids were up all last night, and so my brain's not working right.
Oh, it's all good. I had that the night before.
basically nature versus nurture, right? Like the whole thing. Behaviorism is everything is rewards based, and then you have the other side of it is where everything's inherently there, and then you get those two camps fight back and forth, and then there's the next guy that comes up and goes, what if it's both?
Right.
Turns out it's both.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Anyway, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was you seem to be really good at kind of systematizing things. Like you've developed a business that you are not, how do you say it? You're not the person who has to do everything. And I think a lot of woodworkers and a lot of creative people, we tend to get into this mental headspace of, I got to do it all to be successful at something.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to talk to you about is just how you've gone about your process of making decisions to automate things about what you do.
Well, I'm glad it seems like that's what I do, because I always feel like I'm behind in terms of what I could be doing. And whether it's delegation, hiring, outsourcing, whatever things we need to do to keep the business going, I always feel like we could be doing better because I do suffer from what you're describing, which a lot of us kind of colloquially call like the Superman complex, where we feel we have to do everything. It took me a very long time just to get to the point that I was comfortable having someone else edit my own videos. Now, I'm not a videographer. I just kind of learned and run and gun and just kind of learned as I went. But I knew what I wanted to get out of the video, and I felt like the edit process was part of the creative aspect of it. So sometimes I would film a thing that I thought it would come across one way, but then I'm sitting in the editing chair, I see it, and suddenly it looks different. And then I have an opportunity to add a joke right then and there. So it was like, why would I want to let that go? But the reality is, as time went on, more and more people understood this way of making videos. And if you could specifically find someone who studied my videos and they happen to be really good at editing, there is no reason why I can't do as good as I would have done myself, if not, and most likely better than I was able to do, because the person actually is a professional editor. And I'll tell you, this was something that I resisted so long. I was at a woodworking conference. I sat at a table with a couple other notable woodworking personalities. They all have come to the table probably a decade after I did. And oddly enough, they're all, numerically doing better than I am, because that's just how it works. But I would have conversations with them, and my editor this. Yeah, I sent the footage to my editor and they did this, and it's my editor. And I'm the only one sitting there, the one who's doing it the longest. I've been at this game longer than these people. And I'm like, I don't have an editor. It's me. Yeah. And so I walked away from that thinking, well, okay, well, there's one thing. If they can all do it and their videos are still coming out great and they feel still like true to themselves and what they're creating, I should be able to do this. And, thankfully the budget was there to justify a hire. So that's what we did. We hired an editor, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. But that took a lot of work to get to that point. And then since then, it is still always a bit of a battle in like, who do we bring in? Like, what things are justifiable to pay someone else to do? And at what point is something so important that it's better to find someone who is better at it than I am than to simply get, 75% of the way there because I did it myself. So we do hire out certain things. So we only currently have that one full-time employee as our editor. That's aside from family members. So me, my mom, my wife, we are all employees of the business. And over the years, I've had a couple of assistants that have come and gone. I've mixed feelings about assistants and actual hands-on help in the shop. I got a real love-hate relationship with that. But outside of that,
firing your brother-in-law there,
Let's be clear about that. He keeps quitting. There's a big difference. But yeah, so like Jason was with me 2 different times, and then I had John for a period of time in Denver. And that is part of I don't think it's part of like a control thing. It's just that the job is so like having someone there all the time means someone needs to be keeping them busy all the time. They have to have something to do all the time. And when you do a job like mine, it isn't just one thing. Sometimes I'm in the shop. Sometimes I'm woodworking. Sometimes I'm talking to a camera. Sometimes I just need to be doing this, what we're doing now. But I may be recording a podcast or writing something. And it just becomes really stressful to have to make sure that this person who's getting a good salary to sit there on their butt, like actually has meaningful work to do. So that becomes real difficult when it comes to delegation. But, with my wife, she has always been one to push me to do those things to grow the business. Like, hey, this is like, we long past our ability to do graphic work for ourselves, right? So years ago, like way before I was even thinking about hiring anybody, we found someone who could, do some logo work for us, and then maybe design some small ads for us, and then t-shirts. And then next thing you know, the guy's developing our website, and he's not an employee, but we've been working with him for well over a decade. And he codes everything from the Guild site to the Wood Whisperer site. He's like our main guy for all that. And he's practically like a business partner at this point, just not formally. So it really just comes down to like, where's the breaking point that we need help enough that it's worth paying an outside person to do that task. But otherwise, I do suffer from that challenge of like, it doesn't have to always be me doing those things. It's just sometimes it feels like it'd be more trouble to get someone else to do it, because I feel like I'd still be doing the work to get them to do the job. Right. And I think that's where maybe a misconception, but it's certainly something that I suffer from as well.
Yeah. Like I said in the pre-show there, I'm currently building a house, right? And before I went back to university, I worked construction, and I built a few houses and all of that jazz. And I've renovated a bunch and all that. And so I know what I'm doing. But one of the reasons I went back to school is because I had a repetitive stress injury in my hand. And so when I'm doing physical work, it bugs my hand. And so here I am, I'm in this situation where I have a limited budget, and I know I can do it all myself, but I know I'm going to suffer if I do.
Yeah.
So so what do I do to make the decisions, like where do I spend the extra money and where do I cheap out, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
but so in your business, when you spend, you said you spend time writing, and that's not just your books. Like you do a lot of scripting for your videos and stuff as well, right?
Not all the time. A lot of videos, especially if it's a build, they're just off the cuff because I don't know what I'm going to be saying. I need to do the thing and then decide what I want to say about the thing I just did. Um, when I'm doing voiceover work, that's all that gets scripted and read. And then I find that if I'm doing like a tool review and it's a video that's going to be like very fast paced, a little bit of talking head, then we're going to cut to B-roll. Then we got a little talking head, cut to B-roll. So tool reviews, comparisons, technique, things like that. That I do wind up scripting because now I've got, again, an editor. So when the editor gets this crazy collection of clips from 2 different cameras and all these different angles, he needs to know what the heck I was trying to do. Thankfully, we've been working together so long, even without the script, he might be able to put it together without a problem. But in the script is my chance to write a note to him and say, hey, this is what I was intending with this clip. Go find a funny clip from Strange Brew and put that in at this point, if I want something funny in there. And then he brings his own magic to it as well, with his own jokes. And he just knows my sense of humor. So it's always fun to be able to collaborate in that way. Well, and the other thing so that's as far as writing, that's about all the writing I will do outside of like, I mean, that's not true. Every time you post a video, you bring the video to your own website, you want to be able to tackle some of the SEO. So you kind of maybe more so than I would put in a YouTube description because no one reads those. So I would, on my own website, I would be doing more of I wouldn't call it an article. It's almost like just a little blog post that goes under the video, further explaining some things, providing links, and then making the SEO gods happy at the same time, trying to finesse all of that stuff. And then sometimes it's just, writing out plans and previewing plans for guild projects and things along those lines.
So do you schedule that time out, or do you?
No. Unfortunately, I fly by the seat of my pants, which is, again, what makes it difficult to have an assistant in the shop. Because there isn't like, okay, on Monday, I'm answering my emails. Then, by 10 o'clock, I'm in the shop doing this. It's, I literally might not know what I'm doing until the day that it's happening. The only time things get a little more predictable is if I'm like really deep into a build and I'm trying to get a build done. I may make like a daily outline for the tasks I expect to get done. And I do that as a defense mechanism to make sure none of the other crap intrudes on my mission to get this thing done this week. So that's when I create those daily to-do lists and things, just so I have a gauge. And then I could show my wife in case she was going to tell me, hey, I need you to go do this for me, family stuff. I could say, well, I can do that. But you understand, this will knock my schedule back. So are we okay with that? All right, then I'll go do it. Or no, we're not okay with it. All right, find another solution. I'm going to be in the shop if you need me.
Yeah, and that's I think that's where a lot of us maybe fall down when we're doing stuff is we don't schedule things out. And so then when the advantage of being self-employed, like you are, is when something comes up that you don't, or that you want to do, you can just say, well, I'm the boss, so I'm going to go do the thing.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is when other things need to happen, then you're also kind of shooting yourself in the foot for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
a good example, we came back from vacation. Sandpaper, we're still making all the sandpaper that we sell in-house. That will hopefully change soon. We're working on partnering with some other companies, but we're still making it in-house. So we came back from vacation and there was no sandpaper inventory. We were loaded up with raw material, but it needed to be made. And this is something that I don't even know if I talked about this before, but this was a business venture I got into because I had an assistant. So when my brother-in-law was there looking for other things for him to be able to do in his downtime, I got into this business and then he quit. And I can't just trash the business, right? I want to continue making this stuff. So now it falls on me and Nicole to make it. So we came back from vacation. There was no sandpaper. And the last thing I wanted to do post-vacation is to spend 4 days doing nothing but making, cutting, and producing the sandpaper product. But that's what I had to do, right? Because it wasn't had scheduled ahead of time. It wasn't in the pipeline. It should have probably been done before we went on vacation. But we're just, Nicole and I just trying to get it all done. And unfortunately, the only way to do that was to stop everything and just do sandpaper for a week until we were stocked up. And then I have permission to go back and do the stuff I really want to do.
So just as an aside, that actually seems like the perfect situation for like grab the local high school student who's looking for something to do and pay him piecemeal or something like that.
It could be.
Is that
so? What we've done. So, for instance, I always try to find family first. In this area, we're near Nicole's family, so there are a lot of family, like retirees, that are still looking for something to do. Maybe they could use a few bucks, right? So I know her mom has come in numerous times to help us out. Now that my mom lives here, she's on payroll, but she'll come into the shop sometimes and process a little bit of sandpaper. So yeah, that is definitely something that we could do that with. But especially when a lot of people say what you say. They're like, hey, this is a perfect job for just a kid out of school looking for a little summer work. It's easier said than done. Like if you actually want to find the kid who's willing to do the work, do it properly and not waste my money by doing it incorrectly. And then I can't use that piece of sandpaper. It just gets to the point where like, I just don't have the energy to pursue that person. I would rather take that energy and just make some sandpaper. It's also a temporary thing. I don't think this is sustainable, what we're doing, which is why we're looking to partner with another company to get this produced and mass produced at a level that we just have to sell it, right? That's what we need to be doing. We're not sandpaper makers. So we'll get there eventually. But until then, we're stuck doing it this way.
Yeah, that is very true. What you said about just the mental energy. Are you familiar with the Stroop effect at all?
Mm-mm.
So the Stroop effect, if you ever, you've seen those tests where you see a list of words, like colors usually is what they use. And they'll have like red, black, green, yellow, blah blah blah, and every once in a while the red will be, the font color will be blue or green or some other color than what the word is.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever seen those?
I know roughly what you're talking about, but not specifically.
All right. So basically the Stroop effect is it's a cognitive delay that if you're reading black and white text of red, green, blue, whatever, you can just read through it really quick. But when you pair the color with a different color, the word with a different color than what the name is, it there's a delay, a processing delay there before you can get the right answer, and it's a pretty significant effect.
Like it literally slows you down if you're trying to comprehend what you're reading.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Oh, no kidding.
Especially if you're trying to, as a test, you go read the words off, and if we'll give you a shock if you get the wrong one, or we'll give you a Smartie if you get the right one, whatever, right? You go from like reading it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1, 2.
Yeah, you miss
3.
a beat there.
Yeah, it's quite. Anyway,
that's interesting.
So the kind of the thought behind it is that you have limited bandwidth to do stuff, right? And so just like your computer, if you're editing a video and playing a graphic intensive video game at the same time, it's going to be really hard on your computer, and everything will slow down and crash or whatever.
Right.
Your brain is the same way. And so when you have these having to control somebody else's actions as well as your own actions, sometimes you just don't have the cognitive bandwidth to do it. And so that's where, like in that situation, is like I'd just rather do it myself.
Yeah, and for no pressure.
Because there's also like this all goes down to the whole reason I had you on is so do you know what your cerebellum is? You have so your cerebellum is basically your body's automator, right?
Okay.
So lots of your processes in your life is automated by the cerebellum. So repetitive actions, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, and there's some current theories that talk about how your cerebellum is also involved in automating certain tasks as well. Like the full workflow of I wake up, walk to the bathroom, brush my teeth, wash my face, go make breakfast, right? Like that series of events is all automated in your head. Whereas particularly the neurodiverse community, so like autism, ADHD, they have some cerebellar dysfunction. So instead of being able to automate tasks and eliminate bandwidth usage in their heads, they have to continually make the decision to brush their teeth, and then make the decision to make breakfast, and make the decision to wash their face, and it becomes very draining. And so you see statistically throughout North America anyway, people with autism, ADHD, they consistently underperform economically and educationally and stuff. And it's not necessarily because they're dumb or incapable, it's because they just don't have the bandwidth to make all of these decisions all the time. And so,
not to interrupt you, a quick question though. Outside of a neurodivergent situation, is this something that's simply underdeveloped in young children, when it's like, hey, this is what we do every morning before we do any video games or anything else? The TV doesn't go on till you brush your teeth, you're fully dressed. Like that sort of thing that you have to hammer home into your kids to get that routine going. Is that just underdeveloped at that point, or is it something different when it's in children?
I can't give you an official answer because I don't know for sure, but my suspicion would be it's just a developmental thing, because there are certain things that as you develop, definitely like you'll see clicking, right? Like you watch your kids when they're learning how to walk. They can't walk, and then suddenly boom, they can walk, right? Like they go from like,
it's like
stagger, yeah, and then all of a sudden they're walking. And like language is a perfect example of that. You can teach babies to do like baby sign, and so they can communicate. They know what milk is. They know what they want to say.
Yeah, they know to ask for it. They just might not know how to ask for it.
Yeah, but and like the language comprehension is there. Like you can go, do you want milk? Or do you want more, or whatever the case is, and the kid will respond to that. I mean, some of that is probably just like learning and maybe not 100% comprehension, but the ability to communicate is far greater than their ability to produce sound, control and so there's lots of processes that do develop with time.
Okay.
And that's actually, that goes to, this is a complete aside, that goes to, I don't drink alcohol personally, but it's also why I'm really on the bandwagon of don't let your kids drink until they're at least 18. Because you're familiar with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome?
Yes.
So that's typically associated with in utero, so pre-birth exposure to alcohol.
Sure, yeah.
But what they've realized over the last 10, 15, 20 years of research is that you still, so there's certain moments where your brain just has a complete flood of change. And if alcohol hits those moments, that's what FAS develops at. But as you age, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're like 23, 24, 25 years old. And so if you happen to hit alcohol in those rushes of change during that time, you don't get the full on, oh yeah, that kid's FAS, but it still can mess up the brain.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, development continues throughout life. And I think that's where, going back to, the kid, teaching them to brush their teeth and automating it, like cerebellar or cortical automation, I think a lot of it is probably just repetitive learning and developing a habit. And then once that habit is ingrained, then it's not a problem.
Sure.
But that's where autism, ADHD, the neurodiversity type of thing, they just can't.
Yeah.
And so then that's where you see the mental bandwidth and the mental load. Just, I have to make these 15 decisions every single day,
Yeah.
whereas you and I don't have to make those decisions because we just do them.
Kind of autopilot.
Yeah. And so then as a business owner, sending Todd's your editor, right? You said?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So kind of as a business owner, you've developed that system there to take that mental load off your head, so then you can offload it to somebody else who's maybe better, or maybe, maybe the same, maybe he's even worse, but you don't have to do it anymore, right?
It's just one less job to think about. And the fact that and I guess this is based, it's an individual thing depending on the worker, but with him in particular, he's incredibly conscientious. He's creative. And I know I don't have to he's in Texas. I don't see the guy. So I know though that he's working his butt off to get these things done, and he gets it done faster than I would have been able to get it done. Right. So you're right. There is something about that was a conscious thing that I had to stress out about, jobs that needed to be done that have now been completely taken off of my plate, which is so valuable. And you would think I would learn my lesson from that and apply that to like as many things as possible to lighten the load, but I'm still reluctant with a lot of those jobs.
Now, last time we talked, we talked a lot about physical health stuff, and you exercise daily, correct?
Usually, yeah. I try
to anyway.
I mean, these days it's pretty damn hot. In fact, I just got bit the bullet and got a gym membership because it's like 95 degrees and 75% humidity. So I don't want to be outside. So yeah,
I would melt.
Yeah. So I do try to exercise daily, but I don't always get out there every single day.
So do you have any systems in place that you do to make sure you do that? Because that is something that is difficult for people, even non-neurodiverse people. To develop those habits to step out and do more work today is difficult.
Especially after you've like had a full day in the shop or something like that. Is guilt a thing in this regard? Basically I don't know if exactly what we talked about on the last discussion, but I do have a significant health anxiety, and part of that is that I know it's good for me, and I know that I'm trying to reverse pre-diabetes blood test results, and every time I get into a good routine, lots of cardio, I can see my numbers go. It's like a game I'm playing with myself. I could see my numbers reversing their trend. And that's a super powerful motivator for me. So I think it's mostly fear can be a strong motivator, right? So as you get older, like there are just things I want to be able to do with my children. I want to be able to keep up with them. And I want to be around for as long as possible. So a lot of times when I am at the end of my day and I'm super tired and I go, you know what, I really don't feel like doing it, but I also would like to be as healthy as possible. And I also might want to eat a bowl of cereal later tonight. And the way I'm going to earn that is by burning a few calories right now. So I think that's where it comes from. I also like progress. I like seeing progress. So whether it's cycling and being able to go further or faster than I have in the past. I also I find that the exercise is great, not just for occupying your mind while you're doing it. I had this exact conversation with my brother this evening. He's 13 months older than me. We're very much cut from the same cloth, suffer from very similar things. And he was talking about getting back into the gym. And I said, look, just from a mental health perspective, there is something so valuable to me about muscle soreness and being tired from physical exercise, and not just work. Like work is also exhausting, but in a different way. When I have positive pain is what I would call it. My muscles hurt, my biceps hurt, my chest hurts, or my legs hurt from cycling so much. That does a lot for me. That helps me. My brain just kind of goes into, hey, let's focus on healing your muscles, growing your muscles, eat right, get some protein in there. I don't have as much time to worry about my personal anxieties. So I don't know. It's something that I've been doing for a while now, as I just find it to be very effective for those things. So I get the benefit of actually, being healthier, trying to be healthier, the hour or so that I'm doing the exercise, I can't think about much else but that. And then afterwards, I am focusing on, my muscles and how they feel. And then when I put my head on the pillow at night, I'm pretty tired because I actually, burned a significant amount of calories more than the typical person might on that day. So there's a lot of things rolled into that leads to answer the simple question of how do you find a motivation to work out?
Yeah. Well, from just a pure health perspective, like you said, health anxiety stuff, everybody's always looking for that magical bullet, the magic pill that'll take away everything.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I have a chiropractic doctorate, I have a master's in functional medicine, and getting a master's in psychology, right? Clinical psychology, and I have a bachelor's of behavioral neuroscience. So I know a lot about the human body.
Yeah.
And the closest thing that we have to a magic bullet for any health condition is physical exercise.
Yeah.
It's like there's, with the exception of a broken leg or a broken bone of some sort, physical exercise will help it. But and even with broken limbs, if you can exercise it without stressing the joint, exercise is going to help it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny too. Like, not exactly the same thing, but times when you get a vaccination or a shot, you get the flu shot, or now you're getting the flu and the COVID shot at the same time. And my family gets them, and they're complaining the next couple of days about how bad their arm hurts. And what I do after I get the shot is I come home and I do some curls. And it's amazing how if you are actually working out that muscle and that flexing and constantly moving that muscle around for that, just a couple of minutes after the shot is done, I find that it almost, not always, and not completely, but it definitely lightens the feeling like you just got punched in the arm for the next 48 hours. So it is amazing how that works. And I mean, the other thing is, as I get older, I've had back injuries when I was younger, and they seem to happen a little more frequently, and they take longer to heal when they happen now. So my mission in life now is like to continue to get my core strong and to make sure that I do not have these kind of lifelong back issues, especially since it's just something that naturally, we all kind of head down into that path. And the risk of injury gets greater and greater. And that's one of my motivations is like, look, I still want to be able to jump on the bed and wrestle with my kids, and the fact that I can't do that and they're still young, I want to be able to do that. I need to fix this back problem and make sure that it's fixed for good. And I just continue to do things that respect my back and not do stupid things, which is where like getting the proper equipment in the shop to lift things instead of just manhandling everything all the time. You can't do that anymore. But that's a big motivator for me as well, is to just like keep my back in good health so that I can run around with my kids and, just be a dad.
Yeah. Well, that's where I watched your video you posted today about that lift that you bought to install your dust collector impeller there. And it's funny. It's always been funny to me where you see people who spent, you spend $50,000 on a pickup truck, and then you spend another $50,000 putting a lift kit and big tires and lights and all the crap on it.
Yeah.
But then you're like in the shop, and I'm not going to spend $300 or whatever on a lift.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be a man and pick it up. And
I've seen people try, like they throw it on their shoulder, or they get two people and two ladders and lift it up is probably the safer way to do it with human power. A 5 horsepower Leeson motor with an attached impeller and a plate. I mean, all the power to you if you can lift that up at 12 feet in the air, and especially on ladders. It's just, to me, that's the other thing too. As you get older, you start to think about needless risk, right? Like, yeah, I could get up on a ladder and put the Christmas lights up on the roof. Am I going to do it? Absolutely not. Like, why? It's not worth it. If I fall, nothing good is going to happen. Like, so let's just stay off the damn ladder in the first place. Just, mitigate risk and avoid it where possible. And lifting up a motor 12 feet in the air on top of a cyclone just isn't in the cards anymore. if it ever was.
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about using a gun versus pepper spray or bear
Mm-hmm.
spray.
Okay.
Because I live. My closest neighbor is a mile away, and it's my brother. And then the
Okay.
closest neighbor in the other way is a mile away.
Wow.
And so there's grizzly bears out at the end of the property all the time. There's black bears wander around. Anyway, so we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about carrying a gun to defend yourself against bears versus pepper spray.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the research, pepper spray is better. Like
Oh,
you're less likely to get mauled, and if you do get mauled, you're less likely to be as severely mauled as if you use a gun.
interesting. Okay.
And so I carry pepper spray, and when I'm out by myself, especially. Anyway, this he commented, "Well, wow, pepper spray isn't as cool." He's like, "I will pick alive over cool any day of the week."
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I cycle, I carry, because I often go on gravel roads, and it's in the wilderness. You know, some parts are a little more remote than others. I don't know what I'm going to come across, and I've got some pepper spray. I have no desire to carry a firearm, but I'll sure as heck carry a little thing of pepper spray, because that can work on a lot of things: stray dogs, and any kind of bigger animals, and then stray people,
Weird people.
who want to do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the pepper spray.
I thought you were American and you don't want to carry a gun?
It's common misconception. I mean, some of
For
us do.
shame.
If that's somebody's jam, that's fine. It is funny though. I follow some cycling groups, and they're global cycling groups, so lots of different personalities. But there are people who will make a post about, like, how do you conceal your weapon on your bike, and then there's other people who are just like, what are we even talking about? Like, where are you riding? That this is what you need. But then this person's like, it's my right. It's legal. This is what I want to do. So it's real interesting. That's a deep and difficult topic.
Yeah, I'm curious to how you conceal a gun wearing spandex.
I know, right? It's pretty obvious when you have one of those in your pocket. You can kind of see it.
Yeah. No, I guess this is where I should out myself as a Canadian. A common misconception. I
Yeah.
don't like hockey.
Oh, really?
I
Have
don't.
they? Are they? I mean, is it legal for you to live there if you don't like hockey?
Well, nobody knows where I live right now, so I'm
Oh,
safe
okay.
for the time being. But my
Yeah,
family
okay.
might find out.
You're a little remote, so you're good.
Yeah. 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 I do have pepper spray and guns, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm safe
There you go.
from,
You're covered.
from people.
Yeah.
The hockey crowd.
Right.
Anyway, back to the topic that we were
Yes,
talking
sir.
about before I distracted us, which was now I'm backtracking in my head.
That's
Injury
okay. I think
prevention.
I derailed you when we were talking about neurodivergent people not being able to auto program some of these things that we may take for granted.
Yeah, well, and yeah, and then I talked about your lift, and that's where I think we need to, as woodworkers, as people in general, we need to invest in those things that make the obvious decisions easier,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like the whole concept of having multiple screwdrivers, right? And have the screwdriver you need at the tool
Yeah.
to save time.
Mm-hmm.
But it also saves cognitive loading, right? Because then you don't have to go, well, where did I use my one screwdriver last?
Yeah.
It's just, this is the screwdriver that I use here, so I grab the screwdriver and put it back. And you don't have to take the mental load of remembering where things are either, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this is something where maybe this relates to your mission with what we're talking about today. One of the things that I've done over the years in the business, and it hasn't been that much of an issue lately, just because of time in this business. I'll get to it. I should probably say what it is. But in the past, I used to have a severe problem with the mental load of email. So the reason it's not that much of a problem now is because I've just learned to ignore that, and it's almost just a white noise thing to me. But what I found was I got into the really bad habit of perusing my email. And what I've learned about myself over the years is that if I don't have the time to answer an extensive email, I have no business checking the email, right? If I am not there to answer, if all I do is read it and then leave it in my inbox as a read message, but I didn't respond to it and I didn't act on it, then I shouldn't have been checking my email at that moment in the first place. Because what it does is it throws a mental load on my shoulders, and it's just one more little thing. Oh, there's an email. Oh, there's another email, another email, another email. So I was in this real bad habit of constantly checking my email, and especially, I mean, it's gotten better on phones, but especially in the early days of things like the iPhone, it just wasn't as easy, or at least as intuitive and natural, to type out a response. So I would see something and I go, yeah, I want to respond to that, but it's too much to type on my phone. I'm going to wait till I'm at my computer and I'll do it then. But meanwhile, the load of all this expectation of response and a responsibility I have it's in my head, and it didn't need to be there. So what I had to do was I had to start to do things like take the app off my phone. When I go on vacation, most of the time, social media, email, all those things. I still have my laptop. Emergencies, I got what I need, but I don't even want them on my phone because I don't want them in my brain. So and I have tried to adapt this policy, which might be why I've kind of fixed this for myself, is that if I don't have an intention to respond to an email that takes me 2 or 3 minutes to write, if I don't have that kind of time investment and it's not my intention to do that, then don't check the email at all, because that's what it's going to require to get that inbox down to nothing there, right? I have to answer these things. So it just kind of reminds me in this topic of the mental load that you take on work-wise. That is something that I've tried to get really good at, is identifying the things that lay a mental load on my brain that don't need to be there. So either delegate, have someone else take care of it, or don't let the thing get there until you can act on it in the first place.
Yeah, and there's so many things in our day-to-day activities, like email is a perfect example, where I get anxiety when I see their little red number there.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me uncomfortable when it's there.
Yep.
And so what I've done actually is I've just turned those off.
Yeah.
So it's not even there. And so then when I check, I have to consciously check my email instead of get triggered by the red number. I think that kind of speaks to developing habits. If there is a problem that you perceive in yourself that you want to deal with, then look at the potential solutions of, well, how can I mitigate this in the future? A lot of people have the habit of, when you wake up in the morning, you grab your cell phone and you look at your cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up laying in bed for 20 minutes doom scrolling or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you blink and a half hour went by.
Yeah. And so a solution for that maybe would be like, well, good sleep hygiene dictates that you don't have it in your bedroom anyway, so you'll plug it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? But
that would be nice.
I think
sleep hygiene is a whole nother topic I could spend some time talking about. It's funny. One thing I had noticed, again, with this accessibility of all these things on the device, and then also, routines. I used to, and it's like when the kids were pretty young, I would start to check some of my comments. So I think, okay, kids aren't up yet. No one's asking me for breakfast yet. Let me hop on the computer and just go see, this is when I used to more routinely check YouTube comments. Turns out that's not good for mental health, just in general. But I would go and check some of these comments, write a couple of responses, and what it would do, and something that like Nicole had to point out, it would just put me in a crappy mood. Like I would just, even if the comments weren't that bad, just some of those interactions can be so, there's just something about them that doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't feel positive. So I realized I was bringing that then to my kids. So it's like, okay, now the kids are up. I've been here for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but I would take that negative energy and I would bring it into the kitchen when I'm making breakfast. And I would find myself just distracted by this one person that said something stupid, someone who is meaningless to me otherwise, would still occupy some of that space in my brain, and I would unfairly bring it to my family. So I realized, you know what? I got to swear that off. If I'm interacting with my family, I can't do any of those things that might just change my mental state, right? And then thankfully I realized it about myself, and Nicole kind of prompting me makes me realize, like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I just don't do that anymore. If I'm going to do that, that has to be when I'm at work and I have a full day to process the information, or better yet, get Nicole to check all of my comments before I check my comments. And this way, if there are any people who are just out of line, I never even have to see it because it happened and went away, you know. But it was one of those things where I just had to learn about myself. Like, don't do that before parenting, because it literally puts you in a different state of mind that makes me short-tempered with my kids, and it's totally unfair to do that. So that's one of the habits I had to break.
Yeah. Well, that's reminds me of an article I read a few years ago now, but the title of it was "Good, Better, Best,"
mm-hmm.
and the whole concept behind it was making choices. There's lots of good things. Like we don't have the capacity to do everything that's good.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And then there's good things, and then there's better things to do, but then there's the best thing to do.
Mm.
You know, from a business perspective for you, obviously it's good for your business to be answering comments. Being a good parent is probably a better thing to do.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because ultimately whether you answer every comment or not, is that going to affect? It's going to affect your business. Obviously, you're a social media based business, but does 1% or 2% change versus when you're 60 years old and Mateo never comes to visit you anymore because you yelled at him all the time as a kid?
Right. And I go, but at least I answered those comments, you know. Like, what am I going to be more concerned about at that time?
Yeah, exactly. John Doe 566 knew that I disliked him.
Yeah, that guy was a real prick. I got him with my snarky comment. You know, like, yeah, I do try to put that in perspective. And that's the other thing too, is like how many creators that you see out there don't even interact at all. Either they've had a bad experience, or some of them just maybe they feel they're above it and don't need to. But I fully respect, as much as it can frustrate some people, like, oh, they never reply to anybody. Well, you know what? The masses kind of suck. Like, if you take it on the whole, right? And I could see why someone would want to either delegate that task or avoid it altogether. Because why would you want to let strangers ruin your day? And you could say grow a thick skin, but some of us are just stuck with the skin we have. And if words hurt you, it's real hard to just be like calloused to that and build a callus to that. And I'm like that too. So that's why I know my weaknesses, and I know it's best to just not engage that way, because it's just not worth affecting my children over it. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, yeah. So developing the habits, I guess you need to figure out what your priority is, and then build the system around that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. So I think we've had a good conversation. At least I think we did. Maybe I'm John Doe 666 or whatever.
Well, now I'm going to go yell at my kids when we're done here. So. No, this has been great, man. I always appreciate this.
I've just ruined your life once again.
Yep. So, I won't be sleeping tonight, so thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dead certain everybody who listens. Well, actually, I'll take that back. I know that not everybody who listens to this will know who you are.
Good.
However, it won't make much of a difference. But why don't you tell people where they can find you and all that jazz, and your podcast too, because podcasts, everybody likes podcasts.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So everything I do is primarily at thewoodwhisperer.com. We have an online education sort of private site for like real deep level tutorials in woodworking called the Wood Whisperer Guild. And that's at woodwhispererguild.com. And of course, we have a podcast that we've been doing for almost as long as you could do podcasting. And that's called Wood Talk. We're on a bit of a summer hiatus now. So we took a couple months off, which is kind of something in the past. We used to do that a lot. So it's when you podcast and you do it like on a weekly basis, it does get kind of exhausting. So it's really nice to take a little bit of time off, come back refreshed. So we'll be back with new episodes in September. That'll be back soon. But that's in a nutshell. That's pretty much it. I'm pretty much on any platform. If you want to follow me, Wood Whisperer is typically the screen name. And if that wasn't available, then it's the Wood Whisperer. But most of the time I get there first and I get Wood Whisperer.
Well, that's good. Thanks for coming on the show. And we'll head on over to the wrap-up post after show thing.
Cool.
Man,
sounds good.
It's almost like I've done this 60 or 70 times and I still screw it
Seriously. It's all good. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So if you found anything from this episode to be helpful and you want to reinforce it for yourself, I'd like to invite you to share it with a friend in the next 24 hours. That'll help reinforce it in your mind and it'll help those around you, which is always a good thing. So thanks again for listening, and now I'd like to say thank you to all the amazing patrons of the Workshop Therapy Podcast. You guys make the show possible. If you're finding the show helpful and you want to support it, there are a few tiers, including a simple $1 a month option to just say thanks. For $5 a month, you can get access to the patrons only feed that has a pre-show and a post-show, in addition to the regular podcast all in one feed. You all know that the good stuff happens after the official mics are off, right? If you can't support financially, I totally understand, but I'd love it if you left a 5-star review or told a friend about the podcast. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear that as well. Send it to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com and I'll get it on the show. I want to say thank you to all the patrons of the Workshop Therapy Podcast, but especially to the founding fathers, and they are Mr. Matthew Serio from Argiano Serio, Mr. Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, Mr. Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Mr. Eric Peterson of Overall Maker Works, Mr. Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, and the one and only the Grant Alexander. So a special thank you to the founding fathers, and thank you to everybody who supports and shares the Workshop Therapy Podcast.